In the world of business, there are two types of roles: those who manage data and technology, and those who manage dollars. Both perspectives are essential, but are often at odds. This is where techs and execs come together on common ground. This is Dollars and Data.
Welcome to Dollars and Data, a video series for techs and execs. I'm Laura Noland, your host for today's showdown about data strategy, business continuity, and more. Whether you're looking to understand cross-business goals, build internal buy-in, and foster connections across teams, or simply learn more about data strategy, you've come to the right place. Today, we're joined by Doug Jury, Vice President of Partner Marketing at Zadara, and Jeremy Fitzpatrick, NFINIT's Vice President of Sales and Marketing. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Laura. It's good to be here.
Thank you, Laura. Looking forward to this.
All right. Well, Doug is handling the technical side of the coin, while Jeremy's going to speak to the executive point of view. So let's get started. Starting off with a bit of stage setting, we've all seen harrowing headlines recently about cybersecurity attacks and major power outages wreaking havoc on business data. The number of ransomware attacks rose by more than 150% in 2020, with the average ransomware more than doubling to $170,000. Now, a single ransomware attack causes the average business about 18 days of downtime. And that's not to mention natural disasters knocking out data centers. So Doug, let's start with you. After all of that, what do you have to say about these concerning trends?
Well, it's funny. I've looked into a lot of this, of course, being in this industry, and data is just getting larger and larger, and it really becomes difficult to manage in some cases. Many years ago, a gigabyte was a large amount of data, and now we're talking about terabytes and now petabytes. And I actually did an exabyte quote not too long ago, over 5 years. So data has become the lifeblood of our customers. I read an interesting quote. Is University of Texas said 94% of companies that have an extensive data loss never recover. And I'm sure you're seeing the same thing, Jeremy.
Yeah, definitely. And not only is the data growth becoming a big factor, but it's the reliance on that data that the businesses are challenged with. If you look at the last storm we had in Texas that created all kinds of havoc, we had the California Department of Health Services that was down for 2 days, which meant their Medi-Cal website and the Medicaid management information system were not available. So when you think about the impact to a business of having 2 days where you can't fill prescriptions in a COVID era, you can't, you have to reschedule surgeries. What if someone's actually on a table waiting to have a surgery or is under anesthesia? And now we have to pull the brake, and the ramifications are very damning. And on top of that, too, we're just seeing the data monetization phase really going down from not just the Fortune 500s, but down into the average business size now. And you're seeing the acronyms of IoT and AI and big data analysis that are coming downstream, and even small and medium business companies are taking advantage of that.
So to your points, business continuity is more critical than ever. You mentioned some great specific examples. So what is the first step now in building a data strategy that ensures that business continuity?
I think you have to look at the type of data, of course, and the requirement to run your business. You see behind me, basically the F1 car from Alfa Romeo racing team, and we're now basically all the telemetry, all the data, the speed of the car, the speed of the engine, the heat of the engine. All these things are data points. IoT, as Jeremy said, all these points are very important to run this car, of course. So we're going to treat that data extremely more valuable than perhaps other data out there. So the first thing you do is you look at the concepts of RPO and RTO, recovery point objectives, and the recovery time objectives. Recovery point just simply says, how much data can you tolerate losing? That really is a really simple definition of that. And you're going to assess that in hours or days or even seconds, depending on a race car. The other one concept is RTO, recovery time objective. How much time does it take to get your business back up and running? Again, it could be in minutes or hours, perhaps. And as those numbers go down, the dollars to put that together goes up, of course. And I know Jeremy does this on a daily basis, putting these solutions together.
I would say that knowing what you're protecting is essential. Knowing the line of business apps that the businesses are requiring you to put a protection strategy around is very fundamental to the plan. Information lifecycle management is developed based on business and financial analysis, and they all have to align. What you need to understand what the opportunity cost of downtime is, or data loss, even worse, and looking at how that is going to impact the business. In a manufacturing world, if you have an ERP system that goes offline for a day, you have the cost of lost productivity. You have 3 shifts of workers that are coming in, and you're going to continue to pay them even though you can't produce your product. So you have that 100 workers at $25 an hour burden rate equals about $60,000 a day just in lost productivity. On top of that, you add in the supply chain issues, and if you're doing a just-in-time manufacturing principles and having to try to keep everything on the shelf just as long as you need it, so you're not losing valuable assets or tying up capital and trying to warehouse these things, all of this now breaks that cycle that's very, very interdependent. Looking at, on top of that, penalties for missed shipments to your customers. If you can't get something out the door because you're down for a day or 2 days, that's going to have ramifications to reputation as well as to your fundamental business. To do this, it really makes you focus on establishing those RTOs and those RPOs around the individual applications and the data sets that are behind them.
With this information, how does an organization get in its own way when it treats all data sets the same?
So I think one of the big things that we talk about is this concept of, and what you're seeing right now on the screen is the different gradients of types of data and types of workloads. I love the quote I got from, I was out working at a major RV manufacturer, and the CEO got up in front of his people and he said, "When was it, remind me if you will, but when was it that we could no longer build an RV without a computer?" And of course, we're talking about just-in-time supply and just-in-time manufacturing and all those various pieces. So if we're looking at the different grades 1 through 4, we're looking at, of course, the critical workloads, the active workloads, the backup, and the archive. And they all should be, if you're building a practical technological architecture, you're going to look at very high performance disks at the top and very cost-effective drives at the bottom. And then you're going to work that gradient between the two. And that's really what you have to talk about when business meets technology in the boardrooms. We have to basically assess how much of 1, 2, 3, and 4 do we need to accomplish our goals specifically.
To further that point, business continuity and DR in a lot of companies is seen as an insurance policy. So it's one of those, you hope never to cash, and how much do you want to invest into each aspect of this insurance policy. The sad thing out there is the budgets aren't growing at the same rate that the data is. So you really have to be shrewd in your investment in the business continuity with the appropriate business value. And understanding that value is obviously the first component to being able to put a plan together. One of the things that we do heavily is we really work on educating the business side on the economic impact of each of the business requirements. So that if I'm going to change my retention policy, or I'm going to say I need this RTO or this RPO, how do we sit down and look at what the financial ramifications of each of these decisions are, and let the business start to weigh in on, is that investment necessary? We had a government customer of ours that I sat down and did this with, where we broke out all of the different data sets and applications that they are running. And we looked at, okay, here's based on what is this HR database that holds, some personnel information. If that's gone for, 2 days, is that going to be a problem? No, not so much. Okay, so let's look at a strategy for that and put that into an appropriate coverage policy. However, the main data that's with building out infrastructure and highway projects that has real-time data that's being accessed by construction crews on the ground, that if you have a major setback or you can't gain access to that, your work stops, that we need to take a different approach to. And when you look at that and then you start to feed the business stakeholders back what the actual consequences of these decisions are, then they're going to weigh that out and be able to say, hey, this does make sense, this doesn't. Another way we do that is really having kind of these tabletop discussions around DR events and walking through, okay, so if this application goes away, what do you do on the ground? What do your people do? Is there a backup locally? Is there something, we go back to paper documents? Is there, what is the game plan should this not be available? And really going through that helps everybody get on the same page with what the ramifications are, but also why an investment is required.
What is the path to then creating the optimized solution? Doug?
So an optimized solution is really going to take everything that we've been talking about so far today, and we're going to really be looking at the value of the data, the type of data or the type of storage that we might put it on. A couple of interesting, more factoids, I guess, is that a lot of people take, I want to say, the easy path out. The easy path might be that I'm just going to back up to tape. I'm going to put all my tapes in what I call the Walmart version of a backup. I'm going to put all my tapes into a Walmart shopping cart with the wiggly wheel, and I'm going to basically push it over to a disaster recovery center. Now, there have been lots and lots of studies that 50% of those tapes can never build a business again. They can never be recovered. So we have to basically look at the value of the data, and we have to basically look at whether we're going to use we have to design our RPO and RTO. Are we going to use the type of drives? Are we going to use backup tools? Are we going to use what type of tools are we going to use for those kind of things? I wanted to put in just a real quick concept here is data and consequence. And that really is, we've been talking a little bit about that today, but I have a partner that has an online clothing website. And what they do is they sell their clothing, of course, on something that's very high performing. I cost them some money to basically put that in. They got to keep their websites up and running. But then for analytics, they might choose to use a different grade of storage. And so what they're doing is they're selling, let's say they're selling sneakers, and they want to analyze their data to figure out what's the color that's best sold, most sold in Atlanta. So they may be basically taking that data and then putting it onto a lower cost tier and analyzing that data so they can then send that over to marketing so they can do the appropriate marketing pieces. So the tiers come into play, the monetizing and what is this data required to do for that particular company, and then how do we protect it based on the RPO and RTO that they've set aside for their business. Jeremy, how else do we do it?
Well, I mean, I think it takes you got to take a deep look in your current technical delivery model and understanding the different aspects of it, really drilling down into an in-depth total cost of ownership model and each different modular piece of it. And you got to look at your roadmap and your future needs, and you got to make sure you incorporate the existing assets that still have some value left in them, so you're not just throwing out everything and starting from scratch would be an economically non-viable solution from the start. So really taking a look at where your starting point is and then starting to assess and making sure you're assessing your people and the skill sets that you have internally, making sure that you understand the total cost of ownership around them. Because if you are switching gears and you're going out and you're now saying, hey, we're going to incorporate public cloud as part of our strategy, and you have to train up and develop your staff to be able to manage the new solution, you've got to be aware that once they are trained and developed, they might have a new market cost that is associated with them. And you might have people knocking on their door and pulling them out. Now you have to retrain and retool. So you need to make sure that you're looking at all of those things appropriately as well. And then also, if you have fractional skill sets that are needed, if you have your company's not large enough that you need your own in-house security officer, yet you can get a fractional employee to offset that need without having to pay that high sticker cost for someone you're only going to utilize those skill sets for a short period of time. Looking at the procurement model as a whole, are you looking in favor of a CapEx or an OpEx model? And looking at, perpetual licensing versus on-demand licensing, trying to mirror that with your business goals. If you have a revenue stream that's based on your application or your service that you're providing that scales in the same frame as your expenses, that's great. Most businesses would want that. If it's a capital investment that I have to lay down and hope that I see a return on it, that you're going to have to evaluate things a little bit differently there. Another thing that is usually left off that is very important in my mind is making sure that you have the user experience in mind, because one of the things that can happen when you're going from a production site and the usual workflow that the user is used to, and all of a sudden you're transitioning to a secondary business continuity workflow, and they have to do, jump through a bunch of hoops to be able to access where the application's living now. They have to sign on differently. I mean, heck, I'm on the sales side of the business, and just getting a salesperson to use a VPN is sometimes like herding cats. So we have our challenges. So understanding the end user and what their challenges with adopting it is a big part of it.
Well, so far we've talked about identifying why we need a data strategy, and then how to overcome the challenges in creating one, and then, you know, executing an optimized solution. We are just about out of time. I know we're just getting started in this conversation, and there's a lot more discussion to be had, but just to round out this discussion with a few parting thoughts, what's the number one tip that you want people to take away from this discussion?
So yeah, I'm going to ask for more than one, if I may. But the number one or two tips is make sure that we assess the data, make sure that we create the appropriate RPO and RTO so we can get our data back in the right time, so we can bring our business back. Make sure that we build a solution that can scale, because as we go from terabytes to petabytes to exabytes soon, we want to have a solution that can scale. And there's no one size that fits all. Basically, you need people that do this for a living, and you need support by the folks that basically do this every day of the week. So it sounds easy. Just throw my data on tape and move it out in the Walmart cart. But it's so much more difficult than that. And hopefully today we've given everybody a lot to think about. Jeremy?
I would say the number one thing I would start my plan around is maintaining agility. We've all been tested through this pandemic period of having to change our strategy on a dime. And if you build a strategy that is stagnant and in place and can't bend, it will break. And that's one of the things that I think is imperative, is looking at things in a very modular component level and saying, okay, this is core strength to us. This is something we do well. Let's go ahead and invest and make sure this becomes, you know, a pillar of what we do. This, not so much. This is not something that we need to be experts in or want to be. Let's find somebody who can take that off of our plate. On top of that, you know, really avoiding IT debt. I mean, we see so many situations out there where you've invested a bunch of capital, you've invested time, you've moved the heaven and earth to go after one model, and 2 years in, there's a new technology out there. There's a change in the process, the workflow that this was supporting, and now it's obsolete. And you pretty much are sticking with it because you put your technical debt and your name on that project and on doing it that way. So now you're stuck with it for the life of however long you're depreciating. So that's, you know, something that I definitely would say is a number one factor in the decision-making process. And by all means too, making sure that you have very routine testing and validation of all of the different components and assumptions so that they are interchangeable and you can make things, you know, different routes as you need them.
All right. Well, on that note, that's a wrap. Thank you so much, Doug and Jeremy, for joining us today on today's Dollars and Data episode. And thank you, viewers, for tuning in. If you'd like to catch all of our Dollars and Data episodes, just go to our YouTube channel, subscribe there. And if you like this discussion, please like and share this video. You can also find us online at the web address on your screen. Until next time, keep bridging the IT gap.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you, Jeremy.